Hey everybody, Nick here. So in this video, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some different kinds of sentences and specifically sentence structures. So these are kind of the basic structures which most of our sentences are sort of built out of. And I think it's useful to kind of go over this just to sort of give you guys a sense of this. And also, this will help you, if you learn this stuff, will help you in being able to punctuate your sentences better. So that's important. So there's a couple of preliminary bits of information that I need to give you. And by the way, I'm going to do this super low tech. I've got little signs here I'm going to hold up so you guys can so I can use those as kind of illustrations. So just so you're aware, okay? So that way, I apologize for my sort of lo-fi, low-tech approach to this, but hopefully that will still be useful to you, and you'll get something out of this. I probably also will post a document that has a lot of this information in it, sort of as an accompaniment to the video. So I think that will be useful also. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is sort of get some basic terminology out of the way, and so I'm going to do that right now. So first of all, the thing we need to remember is what is a subject and what is a verb, right? Well, remember that the subject is the noun that performs the action of a sentence or clause, okay? And we'll talk about what a clause is in a minute, but just remember that, right? So the sentence is the noun that performs the action, okay? So this is just review. You guys probably all know this stuff already, but I'm just, wanted to go back and remind everybody because I think that you need to have this stuff in mind when we get to talking about the next thing. Okay, and of course the verb is the action performed by the noun. Okay, so that's actually really important to remember. Okay, so subject is the noun that performs the action, the verb is the action performed by the noun. Pretty straightforward, okay? But just useful to remember, all right? So once we've got kind of that back in our memory, we can talk about what a clause is, right? And you might say, well, is a clause is that the same as a sentence? And the answer is no, because sentences are comprised of essentially one or more clauses, basically, and that's how this works. And so we're going to talk about clauses and the two kinds of clauses that we are going to see. So first of all, let's take a look here what this says. Oops, there we are. A clause is a group of words that contains both a subject and a verb. Okay? So that is the sort of root definition of what a clause is. It contains both a subject and a verb. And there's two kinds of them that we're going to see. Where there are independent clauses, which can stand on their own and effectively form a complete thought, right? So an independent clause could just be a sentence off by itself, although sometimes independent clauses are attached to dependent clauses or to other independent clauses, right? So just keep that in mind. A clause can be a sentence by itself if it's an independent clause, or it can be attached to another clause. But an independent clause is a clause that can stand on its own, right? It sort of is its own idea, its own thought. It makes sense when you think about it all by itself, right? It doesn't need any other additional information to make sense. That isn't true of a dependent clause because the dependent clause cannot stand on its own. So that is the problem with the dependent clause. It must be attached to an independent clause to be a complete thought. So that's the problem with the dependent clauses. Now, there are times when we need to use dependent clauses, right? So when we'll talk about that, we'll see some examples of that as I go through this. But we'll see examples of both independent and dependent clauses, okay? But keep that in mind. So there's two kinds of clauses, independent clauses and dependent clauses, okay? Clauses, by the way, if you can really get a sense of what a clause is, then you're going to that's going to really go a long way toward helping you use commas in particular. So I think that will help you guys, okay? All right, so Okay, so I'm going to move on to my next slide here. My next card. My next note card, or whatever, I don't know, whatever these cards are. Okay, so the first kind of sentence that we have here, the example that I have here, is what we call a simple sentence. Okay, so this is a sentence, right? And in this case, this sentence is composed of a single independent clause, basically one subject and one verb, right? And here we are. So we have Dr. Van Helsing ran up the stairs. The subject here is Dr. Van Helsing. The verb is ran. And up the stairs is just a prepositional phrase that adds some additional information to the sentence. I guess we could take out the prepositional phrase and just say Dr. Van Helsing ran. That would still be, grammatically correct. It just doesn't tell us a whole lot. It just tells us that he ran. It doesn't tell us where he ran or very much at all. So a little more information here, just giving us a prepositional phrase, isn't a bad thing. So, okay. So that is that. So this is an example of what we call a simple sentence comprised of a single independent clause, basically a subject and a verb, and it is also a complete thought, and it can stand on its own. So we know this is an independent clause. If I say to you, Dr. Van Helsing ran up the stairs, that's a complete thought, right? You're not sitting there going, is there some other part to that I didn't, that I need to know about? So just keep in mind, grammatically, this can stand on its own, okay? All right, so I'm going to move on to the next one, which is a little bit different and is comprised of two independent clauses, okay? We're going to take this clause and we're going to add another clause to it, basically, is what we're going to do, okay? So here is what we call a compound sentence, okay? And here we have taken two independent clauses and joined them together. So the independent clause that I have here, Dr. Van Helsing ran up the stairs. So that still is an independent clause, right? We have the subject and the verb. However, you'll notice something here. We have a comma and then the word but, right? So, comma, but he forgot his steak. So, okay, Dr. Van Helsing ran up the stairs, but he forgot his steak, right? Steak, not like a steak dinner, but like a wooden stake that you would, use to plunge through the heart of a vampire, and that's who Dr. Van Helsing is. If you've read Dracula, he's Dracula's archenemy. So that's probably why he's running up the stairs, and unfortunately he seems to have forgotten his steak, which is probably going to be bad news for him if there is a vampire at the top of the stairs or something. Anyway, I put in Dr. Van Helsing in a bad situation here. So, okay, so we have, so the thing that's important though here is we have the two independent clauses. We have a subject and a verb, and then we have a subject and a verb on either side of the thing that's hooking them together. And that is this. That's the comma and then the coordinating conjunction but. But is one of the coordinating conjunctions. There's a list of these. And it's easy to remember them if you just remember the word fanboys, because then you can just, if you write that word down, then it's easy to remember them as a mnemonic device. They are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Those are the coordinating conjunctions. And basically, they can be used to hook together independent clauses and form what we call a compound sentence, right? So that we have two independent clauses hooked together by a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So as long as they're both independent clauses, right, then this is fine. Let's see here. If I removed the pronoun here, he, like if I took that out, this actually still makes sense, but in that case, I would remove this comma because this no longer is an independent clause then, because it doesn't have a subject. So it would say, Dr. Van Helsing ran up the stairs but forgot his steak. Like, that's still correct, but I wouldn't put the comma here then, because this isn't an independent clause. You only put the comma to separate the two independent clauses. Okay? So that's actually really important to remember. This is so when you have a compound sentence, that's one of the main reasons, like when you see a conjunction like and or but or or, if you have independent clauses on either side of the conjunction, then you have to have the comma there. Okay, but if, for example, like I said, this is now not a clause, because remember, a clause has a subject and a verb. If I take the pronoun out here, he, then this second part here doesn't have a subject, so it's not a clause. It's actually just a phrase. So, and it makes sense though, because it's still attached to this one. So phrases have to be attached to independent clauses, just like dependent clauses have to be attached to independent clauses. So independent clauses are the things that are kind of the root thing. There has to be an independent clause. If you don't have an independent clause somewhere in your sentence, then it is not a complete sentence, right? So that's the key thing. Okay, so all right, just something to keep in mind. And I'm going to move on to the third kind of sentence. So this is the compound sentence. Where we have effectively hooked two independent clauses together, right? Using the comma and the coordinating conjunction, right? The fanboy. Okay. So this is our last little sentence example here. Notice something odd here, right? So now I've added, so let's pretend this isn't here for right now. Dr. Van Helsing ran up the stairs. He forgot his steak. Now, as it's written right now, that's actually incorrect, because for this to work, I need to have a coordinating conjunction there. I would need to have but there, right? But I don't have that here, okay? However, if I add a dependent word, what's known as a subordinating conjunction, to the beginning of this sentence, then it's correct, because this now becomes a dependent clause. Okay, so this is now the example of the dependent clause, and that is basically what a complex sentence is. It's a dependent clause that is attached to an independent clause, right? So this says, when Dr. Van Helsing ran up the stairs, he forgot his steak. Okay, so this word when makes the first clause here dependent. So it ceases, because of the word when, it becomes a dependent clause. Because, for example, it can't stand on its own. If I ran up to you and said, when Dr. Van Helsing ran up the stairs, and I stopped talking, you would be like, wait, there should be more to that sentence. That doesn't make sense by itself. Right, and if it doesn't make sense by itself, then it is dependent, right? It's a dependent clause. So the word when here is just one example. It's a subordinating conjunction, and it transforms this independent clause into a dependent clause. Okay? All right. Now, how many of these now, unfortunately, like there's the fanboys, there's only a few of those, right? The coordinating conjunctions. The subordinating conjunctions, I think there's like, maybe 20 of these or more, 28 of them or something like that. There's a bunch of these. And so it's not easy to remember. You'd have to actually just go look them up, But anyway, which you can do, you can go find them listed. Just look up subordinating conjunctions and you'll find the list. Okay. So yeah, and that is the rule here. If we have a dependent clause that precedes a independent clause, so this is the independent clause here, he forgot his steak is the independent clause, right? Because that doesn't have the dependent element. that if we have the dependent clause coming before that, if it precedes it, then we have to separate them, the two clauses, with a comma. So again, the comma is being used to separate the two clauses again. In this case, the dependent clause from the independent clause. Interestingly enough, if the independent clause becomes first, we do not need to include the comma. Okay, so if I said something like, Dr. Van Helsing forgot his steak when he ran up the stairs, right? I'm just changing the pronouns around here. If I said that, then I wouldn't need to actually include a comma. It would just all, the when would just flow on from there. It's only when the dependent clause begins the sentence that we have to separate the dependent and the dependent clause with a comma. Okay? I realize this is a little bit tricky, guys, and whatnot, but go. I'll go ahead and post some, like I said, some supplemental material about this, and hopefully that will be helpful to you guys. There might be some links I can give you also for the Purdue Online Writing Lab with types of sentences or that kind of thing. Okay. But just wanted to sort of go over this with you guys. I think it's a useful topic. You might wonder now, like, well, why do I want to use different kinds of sentences? Why can't I just write all simple sentences that are just subjects and verbs, right? Why do I need to have compound sentences? Well, the answer to that is that your writing is going to be a lot better if you vary up the kinds of sentences that you write. If you vary up the sentence structure a bit, so that you're not just writing nothing but simple sentences, but you are writing, in fact, different kinds of sentences, so that some of your sentences are simple sentences, some of them are compound sentences, some of them are complex sentences, right? And I wouldn't worry about this too much when you're just drafting your paper, when you're writing the paper. That's not really when you should be worrying about it, but it is something you should pay attention to when you go back and you're doing your editing. So when you go back and you're doing your editing, pay attention to the kinds of sentences that you have written and what the sentence structure is for those sentences. And if you find like, hey, I've written like 6 simple sentences in a row here, and this is starting to sound kind of choppy, maybe I need to change some of these. Maybe I can turn some of them into compound sentences or even complex sentences if I add in like a subordinating conjunction or something like that, if it makes sense to do that. Again, just make sure it makes sense, okay? But try to vary up your sentences and the sentence structure of your sentences if you can. It's gonna be a good tactic, I think, to sort of keep a kind of rhythm going to your writing, and not just fall into a bunch of your sentences sounding very repetitive or very choppy, right? In terms of the pattern of the sentence. Okay. Hopefully that was useful to you guys. I'm going to do another quick video now on paragraphs, and then we'll go from there. Okay? All right. Thanks, guys. See you next time.